Okay, I think we got all the fake spoilers out of our system.
Lucas Vader's father.
My favorite. By the way, hi everybody, welcome to my Patreon hangout. Of course, we're talking in a very indirect way about Avengers Endgame, which not all of us have seen, and I'm sure not all of you watching have seen it. So we're not going to spoil anything, but we'll probably talk about it for a while, just in general terms. But my favorite fake spoiler that I came up with, because I had someone, I posted something on social media about, I'm going to see the movie, and one of my friends said, don't you spoil this for me. And of course, everybody immediately jumps in with fake spoilers because that's just what you do. And the favorite one of mine that I came up with was Tony Stark is Rey's father. I was pretty proud of myself for that.
And Pepper is having twins.
Pepper's having twins, yes. And Tony's not the father.
Oh,
yeah, it's happy.
It's happy.
Actually, I thought you really want to light it up. It's Steve Rogers.
Oh yeah.
You want to start an old feud again? There you go.
Tony.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay.
Tony, I was lonely.
This isn't spoiling anything, but I think we should consider ourselves lucky we didn't get some scenario like in Futurama where Fry, going back in time, accidentally bangs his grandmother, becoming the father of his own father.
Yeah.
Accidentally. Yeah.
Accidentally. You knew who that was, didn't you, Fry? Yeah. So just for those of us who have seen it, again, not spoiling anything for anybody who has not seen it yet. General impressions. Did everybody like it? Did anybody think it was like a disappointment? What did we think?
I loved it. I think I have. Yes, it is awesome. It is 3 hours long, but I think it was amazingly achievement in pacing. How well, one thing is to also, I was engaged with the movie throughout. If I wasn't engaged in the movie, it might have been a slog, like Batman v Superman was a slog. Yeah.
For real.
But I did like how like you said in your review, which is I wish I didn't see before I wrote the script for mine, because then I feel like I'm going paraphrase to you now, but it's how each of the characters had to deal with survivors' guilt after surviving a great tragedy is kind of interesting. So just like Dan Olson said in his spoiler movie, you talk about the introspection that the characters in the first act have to go through, where the characters are, if they change, if they not change, was kind of interesting to see. There was a lot of surprises, and I was going, oh, that's clever. It's how are they going to convince that character? It's they did that. Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah. And it's I was not expecting that, but that's totally awesome. And there was also one I was I know that's from the comic. It was talked about, but they do it. It is clever. It is a callback. It is awesome. And so I had a lot of that's awesome. And then in the crying moments, I didn't bring tissues, and so
use your sleeve.
Yeah, right.
Yes, that's what I did. But also, there was moments where it was in the crying moments, and there was a callback as well, as this is not only the end to the Infinity War, not the end, an end to the Avengers, the end to the major arc in the MCU that started with Iron Man, honestly, or it started with Avengers, but the Avengers got started from Iron Man. So and so when I saw that callback, I was I whimpered. Yeah. And I was honestly afraid. I was in a packed crowd too. I was on Thursday night for the fan events. I was afraid that if I was I was holding back only because if I was openly bawling during that scene, I was afraid I was cause a chain reaction and cause everyone else in the audience to start crying as well. So I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
If I could throw out something from somebody who hasn't seen it yet, I think a couple of things to keep in mind of the fact, first of all, that this wasn't structured as a single movie any more than Infinity War was. Right. And the Russos, they are about nothing if they aren't about continuity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and,
for sure.
and just being able to carry that arc all the way through, and then not just the problem with Infinity War is it stops with, Nutsack sitting in his, his little thing there. Gee, ain't I happy? Gee whiz.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing about.
And you just know that they're going to carry it through to the end. And as for the time, Infinity War ran at 2.5 hours, did it not? Or somewhere in that vicinity?
Somewhere in that neighborhood, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, if if there had been problems with Endgame, I would have been very surprised because that
Yeah.
would have represented a massive discontinuity.
Yeah, I know. Well, like I say in my review video, that the criticism I expected to make, whether I liked the movie or not, was that it was too long because it's 3 hours, and it's like, well, that's almost always too long, no matter what the movie is. But that I can't honestly say that because it didn't feel too long. It felt like it was exactly as long as it needed to be, and it didn't drag, and it was packed. But
There were too many notes.
an Amadeus reference, I love it. An Amadeus reference and an Avengers talk.
Well, I
It
mean,
feels like an hour and 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To me,
it really.
that's how long it felt.
There are times. There were times watching it in the final act when a lot of and the final act itself is just so packed with stuff, and I was sitting there watching it, and I there was like a moment where I like went back and was reviewing all the things that had happened in the movie up to that point, and I was like, holy shit. Like this is an eventful movie, and yet it doesn't feel too long, and it also doesn't feel rushed, which is another thing. It could have felt like, oh my god, they just packed like 6 movies worth of stuff in here, and it doesn't feel like that either. Like what Jonathan said, it's a really good balancing act. Like and that in and of itself is an accomplishment. It's like, how the hell did they pull this off with all these characters and all these plot lines?
Well, they did have 20 movies leading up to it.
True. But see, that makes it all the more impressive, I think. Like that's one of the things that I think people in 20 years, when film students, study this franchise, which I think they will, one of the things
Dr. Garrett, they will study this movie.
I think they'll almost have to. I mean, just because of its success, of its cultural significance. I mean, they'll almost have to. And I think one of the things that will be pointed out as to what made this so successful is that there is a thread that begins in Iron Man and comes all the way to this movie and gets paid off in this movie. And that's and of course, the thread doesn't show up in every single film. It's not like
it doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to, but through the Iron Man films and the other films where Tony shows up and the Avengers team up movies, obviously, like there's a thread that begins at the very first one and is tied off in this one in a really satisfying way. And that's amazing that was able to be maintained.
I'd have to guess that you get a bit of a hint of that in that one trailer that I saw, which has him out in the desert recovering from the crash of the Mark I, and and he's reflecting back on where he's come from. So they're already establishing that hook with there.
Oh yeah, it's very much
okay. You're getting close. I'm getting worried.
It's not super cool.
We're not going to confirm or deny.
I haven't seen it. I'm just making an observation.
It is. But yeah, it's a really the way that they handle it, and but again, without feeling like they're just going back over familiar territory. I mean, it's really
that moment when you realize that all these movies are essentially episodes of a glorified TV show, and these last couple movies were a 2-part season finale, not even series finale, just season finale.
What was Babylon 5? I mean, it's structured very much the same way, except I mean that was over 5 years and what is 110 episodes?
It's like, well, what it's like is it's like a comic book. I mean, and that's and I keep coming back to this over and over. And I think I mentioned this in my review video when I recorded it, but I think I might have cut this bit out because I talked for like 45 minutes and I was like, oh God, I just got to cut this shit down. But
you're talking too much. Shocking.
Who would have imagined?
Steve's such a wallflower anyway.
I don't really like to share my opinions about things. But like the thing that to me has always set the MCU apart from even other like good comic book movies, like the like the Donner Superman movies, which I love, or the Nolan Batman movies, or Raimi's Spider-Man movies. Although Raimi's Spider-Man movies are kind of close to this, but like the MCU movies don't have an ounce of embarrassment about being based on superhero comics. Like there's no self-consciousness. There's no sense of like, we're sorry, we know this is kind of silly, but
you have to hide the code names in the latex.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, there's no attempt to be like, okay, let's take the comic book stuff, but let's make it cool. They don't do any of that.
Yes.
They say,
look, Superman shouldn't have red underpants.
Yeah,
Does
exactly.
Does anyone have any insight on why, like, the 90s and I think early 2000 superhero videos, they seem to be obsessed with killing the villain before the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think Batman started that, and Batman was a major success. So I guess they figured, well, that's the formula now.
But why?
Yeah.
I don't know.
There was also the 90s comics that were in the dark
That's
ages
true.
as well. That could have been like, we got to make them edgy. That's what all the kids
The
are
dork
like.
ages.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the dork
dork
ages.
ages. Yes.
Well, I think Denny O'Neil said the problem with that was, he said there's nothing wrong with deconstructing the narrative, but at some point you have to reconstruct it.
Yeah.
they never got around to reconstructing it.
I
But
paid for this whole seat, but I'm only using the edge.
yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that's one of the things that I really think makes the Marvel cinematic universe so great, is that they embrace, and if you look at the franchise as a whole and all the different little corners of it, it embraces all these different subgenres within Marvel Comics, and it says, yeah, to hell with it. It's all under one umbrella. Yeah, the Guardians of the Galaxy and Iron Man are in the same universe. Deal with it. You know, and they know that if it's good, we will deal with it, because that's exactly what we do in the comics. You can have Iron Man, which is relatively grounded, you know, not, it's obviously a fantasy, but it's relatively grounded, and then have like aliens and shit going through wormholes to cross the galaxy, and you're like, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, never mind Doctor Strange,
Yeah.
which I'm sorry, Doctor Strange is the big departure. If you want to talk about departures, I mean, you want to talk about violating the laws of physics, bang, there you go.
Yeah, and it works, it fits, and when they all get thrown on screen together in the big crossover movies like this one, it's like, yeah, it works because
they make you believe it.
Exactly, because it treats it. Yeah, go ahead.
The thing that we are engaged with the story because we are engaged with the characters.
Exactly, we're invested in them.
Yeah, we believe it because we want to.
Yeah, which is why what kind of also what just re-released like on Friday was the second season of She-Ra, and
yeah, I need to watch that.
Now here's my only like problem that was a bit of surprise for me. It's like, oh, it's only 7 episodes long, but I know that it's going to be a third and a fourth season, so I'm just not bothered. And plus, it's kind of like, if they feel like to tell their arc only needs like 7 episodes, they don't need to like produce more filler. But one thing, and it's like I like about like second season of She-Ra, which I thought I also liked about the first season. There's world building in that, but that's not the focus. The focus is the focus would be like characters first, then story, then the world as well. And so they struck that balance where it's like you can have some world building in like this episode, but it's like we're focused with the characters and what they're doing. And also in other episodes, there's like story. So it's like for some people who are like want a lot of world building, they're probably not going to get that from watching any of like She-Ra or any of all of She-Ra, because it's more character focused. But that's why I think I enjoyed the She-Ra cartoon, because it is character focused, and well, they also have good characters as well.
Yeah.
And again,
I'm sorry, but I can't enjoy a children's cartoon that doesn't have a good physics engine.
One thing
right out of it.
One thing that I think is kind of starting to make a comeback, I mean, I hope it is the episodic format, because so many shows these days are engineered to be binged in one sitting, and that's just not healthy to like encourage people to consume all of their media that way. Like, okay, I'm going to set aside 8 hours today, and I'm just going to sit down and do nothing. And no, I kind of miss the days when something could be broken up into little chunks that you could just have them 1 or 2 at a time.
Yeah.
I mean,
thankfully, with these movies, you can do that.
Yes, with these movies, you can do that. Yeah.
Hi, James.
Well, I mean, with the Avengers movies, you do have to set aside an 8-hour chunk for each one, but
Yeah.
Because you have to watch it, then you have to take a break, and then you have to watch it again.
And you say that, but then like Star Trek Discovery's episode this Thursday and Game of Thrones episode last Sunday were both stopping on a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, last Sunday's Game of Thrones was really more of the, girding the loins, getting our rocks off, and, oh dear, here come the evil guys. Here come the White Walkers.
Yeah.
but
I do-
violence and sex. Yeah, that sounds like
and
Game of Thrones.
there was plenty of both. So
I agree with what Nick was saying, though. I mean, as much as I like the serialized storytelling. And I think someone mentioned Discovery, and like Discovery really leans into that, leans into being serialized, which is weird because it's not released as a binge show. It's released 1 week at a time, but it's structured like a Netflix show where they assume you're just going to watch the whole thing at once. And yeah, I do, as much as I like that, and as much as it really works when it's done well, I do kind of miss the self-contained episodes. That's one of the reasons.
Do you know what I miss about that, right?
What? Go for it.
You know, sometimes you go and stick a random episode of Star Trek on and think, I'm going to watch some season 3 episode of TNG for no particular reason. I got fuck all better to do.
Yeah.
You can't really, you don't feel like that with Discovery. You don't think, all right, I'm going to stick on, episode 2 of season 3 because it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So
that's one of the things.
Oh, hey, it's the episode where a barrel falls and shatters Worf's spine.
Worf versus the barrel. Yeah, I'm gonna do. Actually, I was watching that episode, the Worf barrel episode, a couple weeks ago, and I came up with a Trek actually topic for it because I really want to talk about that episode.
The spine was completely shattered.
Well, and then, I mean,
I'm not going to hurt myself. You can deactivate the restraint field.
Yeah. Oh,
there is no restraint field, Worf.
In that case, could you hand me that knife over there? Completely unrelated.
Yeah,
I haven't
right.
seen that in years.
Yeah, but yeah, I feel like that's, as much as I really liked Discovery this season, but yeah, that is something that is a little bit. It's an adjustment. It's very different because you're right with TNG, or even with most of Deep Space Nine. There are certain stretches of Deep Space Nine that are really highly serialized, and you can't really just pluck an episode out. But for the most, like, you can watch The Visitor or In the Pale Moonlight or Far Beyond the Stars, and it's like it is what it is, and you don't need to know everything that happened before.
I've got a problem with Deep Space Nine. Is that whenever I stick a random episode of Deep Space Nine on, I end up watching 10 of them.
Yeah, right, exactly. Oh, such a good show.
That's the problems you want to have.
I saw the I saw the documentary because I was a Kickstarter backer, and they released the backer stream like last week or earlier this week, and oh god, it's so good, and it made me want to just go back and watch the entire series again. It's like just one of those things where it's like, oh god, how can I not watch Deep Space Nine now? But
then you watch like the season 2 episodes where like Julian Bashir falls in love with that disabled girl, and you think, actually, this is pretty shit sometimes.
Star Trek, there's times when you can tell that. I think every Star Trek show has this. I think even Discovery has this from time to time. Like, you can tell their heart is in the right place, but they're just doing it wrong. Like they want to do like a story about people with disabilities and
it's
how
so patronizing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like, oh, this isn't it. This isn't the way to do it.
Well, when you got like a staff writer room, mostly with able-bodied people, and like, do they know people who suffer with disabilities?
Yeah,
so that's so intersectionality.
There's a thread. There's a series of scenes in the DS9 documentary. It sort of becomes like the spine of the movie, where a lot of the old DS9 writers come back and they break the story for like an imaginary season premiere for season 8. And it's really cool. It's really interesting to hear their ideas and hear like what they would do if they got to make the show again. But you can't help but notice that it's like 5 white guys in their 50s, which means when the show was being made, it was 5 white guys in their 30s. And we were watching it, and my wife and I were both like, it's like kind of a miracle that the show was as progressive and, quote unquote woke as it was, because I mean, obviously they must have been paying attention to something, because it is still, relative to the Star Trek franchise, it's one of the most progressive and inclusive of all the series.
Would those guys
and it was made by a bunch of white dudes.
Far Beyond the Stars? Would those guys have been involved in writing things as good as Far Beyond the Stars? Yeah,
they here's the thing about that. I think the episode was written by white writers, but they were wise enough to know and were sort of smart enough to know that Avery Brooks had to be the one to direct it. Because it is very much a story about racism and how racism specifically how it affected Black people. And I think they knew, like, okay, if we're going to do this, we can't have just the next white person in the order be the one to direct it. We have to give this to someone who really,
I would have to believe too that they did no small amount of research as to what the culture was in the 40s, especially in the pulp sci-fi culture, which was, I mean, that was really the germination point for modern day science fiction. I mean, Asimov came up in that time. Heinlein did. All the greats.
Ellison,
and absolutely Ellison.
But it is. It's just, and actually, and they make a point of that in the documentary. They make a point of talking about how like it was important that the show be political and that the show be relevant to the times. And I think there's a line in it where Ira Stephen Bear says, as long as we're living in this century where there are so many people who can't even agree on the concept that all people deserve to be treated with basic humanity, why are we talking about the 24th century? And I thought that was a really good point.
What is the name of this documentary? Because hold
on, I will go on to share my screen because
it's a Fathom event coming up.
Fathom events of what we left behind. Looking back at Star Trek Deep Space Nine ticket. It's only one day, May 13th, so it should be in near at your major multiplex theater. Check it out at Fathom events / what we left behind. And there we go.
And it will be released. Shout Factory got the distribution rights to it, and it'll be released on Blu-ray, and I presume somewhere streaming after that. So it'll be available.
Yeah, that's a Monday too. I can catch that.
But it was really good, and especially if you were a fan of the show, it's really good.
If you weren't a fan of the show, you can go fuck yourself.
So going back a little ways, it's not that, I mean, just one more thing about serialized format shows. It's not that I mind them. I like serialized stories too, but so many of them are like that now. It's almost like every new thing that comes out is pressured to be binge watched, to be in that format. Because it's seen as this elevated new form of storytelling. It's evolving to a higher medium. And not every story. Sometimes you only need 40 minutes to tell a good, complete story.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell it to Stephen Bochco.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. Like there are so many great TV shows from, the first great television show wasn't produced in the year 2000. I mean, there were so many great TV shows. Blue's Clues, that was it. But still one of my favorite TV shows ever is NYPD Blue, and that was for the most part episodic. I mean, the characters grew and evolved over time, but it wasn't serialized.
But sometimes you just know that reset button is coming at the end of the episode, and it takes away the give a shit factor, doesn't it?
Yeah, and Star Trek really did suffer from that. I mean, the Star Trek, the original series, as much as I love it, suffered from that because it's like, oh, Captain Kirk went back in time and fell in love with a woman that he had to allow to die to save the future, and now he's just kind of fine. He was a little bummed at the end of the episode, but next week it's like it never happened.
Well, Kirk is a man whore, and he sleeps with everything. We know this.
No, just the Federation's counseling services are just that good.
Exactly. He just needed a week.
Federation's mind wipe services.
Well, and the same thing with Captain
before they employed Deanna Troi, wasn't it?
Yeah. So and I think that's why so many of us who are Deep Space Nine fans are so fond of Nog's storyline throughout the series, because he doesn't, I mean, all the characters in Deep Space Nine change, all the major ones, but he goes through such an arc of change from the beginning to the end, and you just that would have never happened on Next Generation. As much as I love that show, that just would never have happened. You never would have seen a character change that much.
And by the end, he's actually addicted to root beer.
I wouldn't blame him.
I've only in the last year or so really been getting into Deep Space Nine. I've been watching some of it here and there. And is it weird to say that that Quark might be my favorite character.
No, Quark's a
Yes.
great character.
Well,
I
he's
love
a
Quark.
continuity
Even-
character. He's part of the glue that holds DS9 together.
Yeah, Quark is a
Even
great
when
character.
he's going on this,
He's the
even
social
when he's going
director.
on this, even when he's going on this insane right-wing tirade, like they don't teach children the rules of acquisition anymore. Society's falling apart. I still find it fascinating because he's so passionate
because
about
you
it.
can the Quark. I think it's clear that we as the viewer are not being told by the show that we are supposed to share Quark's politics. You know, Quark, we're not supposed to side with Quark on that stuff. So Quark is supposed to read as wrong
You
about
only
that.
think that because you're an S Jew.
Right, exactly.
Real fans
But
know that Quark is the hero.
Quark is the hero because he represents 20th century American capitalists, the heroes of everything.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because, like, here's the thing: we just gotta accept. Everyone else has just their own custom reality. Even if, like, something has clear, like, anti-capitalist themes, sometimes the depending on your mindset, depending on the context you go into it, depending on your environment or your worldview, you will read things in like one way. Which is why you will just hate a movie that has like female empowerment because you think like, come on, everything's all equal and stuff like that. I actually heard my younger brother grimace about a certain scene in like Avengers because of that.
Oh, I think I can guess exactly what scene it was.
Yeah, exactly.
I can think of a couple of scenes,
and
it's unfortunate, but these I swear these guys have not moved on from 2015.
No,
the
no,
last
they
several
haven't.
years of this discourse has corrupted my ability to enjoy movies because now every time like something happens, like a male character is shown kind of emasculated or whatever, even though I don't have a problem with it, I hear this little voice in my head from people that I know. It's like, oh, I know he would think this is part of the agenda to wipe out white people. Or whatever.
I thought when I
I'm like,
saw,
gosh darn it.
when I
genocide.
when I saw Captain Marvel, when I saw Captain Marvel, I guess last week or week before last, I really like Captain Marvel too. By the way, I haven't done a review about it, but I really like Captain Marvel, but I was surprised by how like heavy-handed and preachy it wasn't. Because that, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised because most of the people who complain about stuff like that tend to exaggerate. But I was watching it and it's like you can get like if you're looking for it, like you totally get the sort of women's empowerment theme in there. It's not hard to see, but it's not like they slap you in the face with it. It's not like if you're not looking for it, you can watch it and it's just a really cool superhero movie about a person who is sort of discovering who she is and, coming to terms with her power. And, it's like a classic superhero story, but
no, it's obviously a
washes the
lesbian
dishes.
coming out story.
Yeah.
The cat is an allegory for vagina. And the vagina
But
is
Steve,
destroying the powerful man.
Yes.
Blinding him
But there's
in
this,
one
there's
eye.
the, but
Yeah, well, at the
guys,
same
there's the
time,
scene
her
where Nick-
F-15 is an allegory for the penis.
yeah, naturally.
But guys, there's a scene where Nick Fury washes the dishes.
Oh my God.
I thought the face hugger in Alien was an allegory for the vagina destroying man, and also the rest of the crew.
Yes.
No,
Well,
the
here I
face
thought it
hugger
was
is
an
an
allegory
allegory
for
for a
deep
vagina penis thing.
The face
a
of
rape
the
allegory.
alien is specifically designed. It's meant to actually look really, really violating and rapey.
Yeah.
Designed that way.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
it's everything about all of Geiger's work.
Yeah.
Let me try to make people as uncomfortable as possible.
Let's see. Let's put a penis on top of the vagina, and then put another vagina inside the penis,
Okay.
and then give it
Okay,
teeth.
to really derail this conversation, are you guys familiar with the Species movies?
Yes.
Sasha Henstridge,
Nope.
naked. Yes.
Only the actress.
Okay, I think all of the great horror movies, all the great like monsters, they are designed to tap into a specific fear that people have. And in that regard, I think the first Species kind of falls flat because what's it playing into? Men's fear of having to pay child support. But the second movie, that plays into how horrifying the very prospect of getting pregnant is for women. It plays on
Right.
that fear by having
Well,
a guy be the
I just
villain.
watched discovered and then binged Renegade Cut.
Okay.
He talks about stuff like that, and he talked about the feminine horror, and he also talked about queer horror. How specifically
It's a
he was
cute
talking
cat.
about Nightmare on Elm Street 2. and how that's different for horror in that both the villain and the hero are coded queer. How the entire movie is a queer, an allegory for coming to terms with your own sexuality.
That's interesting.
But yeah, the feminine horror, talking about how horror movies frequently make the feminine the horrific, like Carrie and so on. So that's how the Species franchise fits into that, by making everything feminine horrific, monstrous, and alienating to men.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is a really old horror trope.
Yeah, you can extend that.
The Alien films are actually some of the best, like the best feminist films with a really, really strong female lead character. But they don't even make an issue of the fact she's a woman at all. She's just an absolute badass.
And at the end, you're talking. And at the end, you're talking about femme on femme. You know, between Sigourney and the Queen. Get away from her, you bitch.
That's Alien, not Alien.
I love how the Queen, even if she doesn't understand English or human language, she understood the tone of that. She knew what she was saying.
You don't know that
she
she could be a very intelligent, very well-spoken black monster.
Yeah, that's that's what we all want to see, though, isn't it? We want to pit the women against each other. That's why we enjoy that. It's not empowering.
These are movies written and directed by men, so of course.
Well, I mean, let's be real. As it comes to the Queen, I mean, for a woman, she had a hell of a stinger.
But so I think at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about Avengers. We sort of hopscotched our way through other Marvel shit and Star Trek and Species.
That's how we always
do. Don't we always?
We made it through Marvel for a very long time. Before we got to the horror stuff.
Before we got bored with Marvel, and we're like,
it was basically we went from people complaining about Captain Marvel to horror. It was a
which actually is a pretty straight line.
There at the end.
Yeah, it's a pretty straight line to go from people complaining about Captain Marvel to horror.
I want to kind of bring it back into like the dichotomy of like episodic versus a serial, because as a kid growing up watching like the 90s X-Men cartoons, that was actually my sticking point against the X-Men cartoons in the second season. It was very serialized.
Yes.
So if you miss one Saturday morning, I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm going to have to like wait 6 weeks, 12 weeks for me to catch up for summer reruns and stuff like that.
Well, Saturday morning cartoon, the networks didn't fucking care about the serialization. They would
there's that.
Throw out any random episode.
The Spider-Man cartoon that aired around the same time was the exact same way. It was extremely episodic. Like every episode was to be continued. The entire season was basically one long story, which was not really other than X-Men doing that same sort of thing. Like it just was not done. Like the Batman cartoon was extremely self-contained. Episode per episode.
Very uneven in quality.
True, and that's the same thing with like classic Doctor Who as well as current Doctor Who, because like each different serial, different story arc is have different like writers. So it's like, and especially with classic Doctor Who, it's like if you have bad writing, what do you have? You have cheesy special effects and over the top acting, and it's like, is that enough to carry a story? Most times not. So if you got like a bad episode, you got a bad episode, which is why people
ask Lost in Space.
Yeah, you just reminded me. These days, with shows like Adventure Time and Steven Universe and so on, it's actually become pretty standard to have the characters age in real time, as the shows are released. But one of the earlier shows that tried to do that was King of the Hill. And after the first couple of seasons, where you see Bobby and his friends hit puberty and start getting older, Bobby actually seems to age the least. The guys like above them, on the network, they were pissed off. It's like, hey, stop doing that. It's going to confuse watchers to see these characters go back and forth in their age. We can't syndicate the show and do reruns now.
Yes, it's all about making money.
Cheers.
Of course it is.
I never understood that. I mean, I guess I understand it and I don't understand it, but like when they show shows in syndication, most of the time they air them in order.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, they did not do that back in the days when TOS went initially into syndication. They would, I mean, I still remember that when it was on WUAB here back in the early 70s. They'd show anything in any order and they didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was a point where they actually, say hello, Cat. There was a point where now we're going to do it in order with limited commercial interruptions. And I'm sort of going, whoa, because it was completely not the practice.
They didn't, with TOS, they didn't really air them in order the first time anyway.
Well, mostly, no, they didn't. Although I can't help but notice that that the star dates were more or less in order.
For the most part, yeah. There are a couple. I noticed because when me and Jason do the Ensign's log, we honor the original broadcast order. Like, so for our show, that's the order in which things happened, the broadcast order. But so the first episode was the Man Trap. That's technically the first episode of Star Trek,
right?
Even though it was not. I think it was like the 5th or 6th one that they produced, and. But they aired that one first because they thought that was the best one of the shows they had completed, and so that ended up being the first episode. And they did that a couple other times. I've noticed as we've been going through and doing our show. There are times when the next broadcast episode was not actually the next episode produced, and it's just it doesn't really matter because there's not really any continuity between episodes in the original Star Trek. But it's interesting. It's like, so like, did they just not care? Was there someone at the network who was like, oh God, just grab a tape?
Well, nobody was thinking about a through line as it came to the development of series like that back then. I mean, it wasn't part of their consciousness at all.
Yeah.
It's better though, isn't it? When characters age, it's actually much, much better and more interesting to watch. I also thought it'd be really good if by now, like, Bart Simpson would be like a middle-aged alcoholic. In like 5 years or something.
Yeah, he is a middle-aged alcoholic. It's just he started so young.
Yes.
See, that's Lauren, I just want to say your cat jumping on the camera. I swear, just the head movements. I could just see him thinking like, oh, Dad's talking to his imaginary friends again.
Who are you talking to? There's nobody here. About the characters aging, like that's one of the cool things when like something like the Marvel movies where it's a live action adaptation of something where the characters don't age, and because it's been so long running, like the characters do age because the actors playing them age, so they kind of have to acknowledge the passage of time. And there are just things, it puts a limitation on it because you can't do that version of Captain America forever because Chris Evans isn't going to look like that forever. Yeah. But it also, you can do things with that you can't do if they just stay the same age. It's like
you end up like with Roger Moore in A View to a Kill, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, they should recast this. He's done enough of these.
There is one good thing about A View to the Kill. This opening song by Duran Duran is an excellent song. It's one of those few excellent James Bond songs.
I'll tell you what, as it comes to watching people grow up in a series, I have to say, as it comes to Game of Thrones, my favorite so far has still been Arya Stark. I mean, she's matured. B, she started out great to begin with. I mean, from the time she was given Needle, but to watch how she's evolved and grown and become, frankly, dangerous. Boy, do I like. I mean,
I saw an interview with Charles Dance, and he said he was really impressed. He has one scene; it's just him and her, and he said he really enjoyed doing it. And he was really impressed with how good she was as well.
I like Charles. I like Charles Dance. You're going to think I'm crazy, but one of my favorite roles for him was Sardo Numspa.
You're crazy.
And, hey, stipulated.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but you're crazy. Yeah. You're just making random noises.
With Eddie Murphy. Murphy was horrible in it. Dance was wonderful.
Yeah.
Hey, I got to run anyway. I got 6 o'clock UK time. I got dinner, so.
Oh, all right. Thanks for stopping in, man. Good to see you.
Later, JD Modify. I forgot your name. Oh, forgot. James Dodify.
J Dodify.
Yeah. Jimmy Diddle.
And it mentioned, it mentioned this kids' confusion as they're watching like the first episode of a series, and yet as you watch it, I felt like I'm missing something. They're not explaining things. I feel like I'm supposed to already know those things, and that was like watching the first episode of Card Captors, because that's not the first episode. That was actually the 8 episodes. But the reason why they chose the 8 episodes is because that's when the male character shows up. A female-centric show, they can't have that. no girls on Saturday morning cartoons will watch an action-oriented show with a female main character, despite Sailor Moon. So
That's never happened before.
but
But
yeah,
one of my favorite animes was The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, and it was serialized, but they intentionally didn't just air them out of order. They were out of order. That's how they wrote it.
yes, exactly. So yes, there is like a broadcast order for that, where it's just like in the main beat of the story is like in the first 8 episodes, the actual memory calling Haruhi Suzumiya, and then the filler episodes are at the end. But in the broadcast order, they like take 2 episodes of the Melancholy and then split it up. So you actually end with the end of the arc of the Melancholy Haruhi Suzumiya arc, and then everything else is like in sprinkled in between. So the fillers actually like put in between, and then you actually finish on a strong note with the end of the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya arc. And I think that is a better way to watch the show, because I did watch it in the produce order instead of the broadcast order. You really got to like watch it in the broadcast order. Now, if you watch the second season of Haruhi Suzumiya, I'm sorry, but the Endless 8 is the same exact episode 8 times, but they animated each episode differently.
Oh.
But it's the same
variations on a theme or what?
No, it's the exact same episode.
It's a time loop.
Yes, it's a time loop sort of thing. It's a Groundhog's Day
Oh,
sort of
no,
thing.
I was going to say Groundhog. Yeah, and then you get something like Firefly, which Fox completely screwed up. You know, showed the episodes out of order, didn't promote it, and then canceled it.
Yeah,
People aren't responding to this show. I wonder why.
The free marketplace of ideas at work, guys.
They do. That's something that networks. I guess they still do it. I haven't heard any like particularly egregious examples of it recently, but they used to do that kind of stuff all the time, where like they would take a show, and it seemed like they were deliberately burying it. And it's like, why would
Futurama?
Yeah, Futurama is a great example. And Family Guy before it came back and became like a mainstay. It's like, why? You bought the show, you already paid for it. Why would you not want to give it every chance to be a success? Like, this makes no sense. Why are you trying to kill your show?
Yeah, probably
But it
because
also
there's an exec in the front office that took one look at those. Nah, don't like it. Dump it.
Yeah.
Space Cowboys? No.
Fuck this.
There's a video that I
I think
recommend.
Stargate Universe did that. Sorry.
There's a video I recommend that shows how this also happens to movies. It's about Treasure Planet. It's called Disney's Biggest Mistake. Except, the guy's saying that the movie itself is really good, but they did everything they could to bury it. They basically sent it out to die because they were tired of that kind of animation, and the movie was expensive. It's like, look, we don't want to make movies like that anymore, so we're just not going to give the audience a chance to, really enjoy it.
Yeah. Oh, it's like
so it even happens to movies sometimes.
It's like Republicans intentionally trying to sabotage the Affordable Care Act so they can say, "See, it doesn't work."
Or the Green.
No, it's more like the Republicans trying to sabotage democracy.
Democracy doesn't work. We need a strong man. It's the only way.
We're talking politics, so again, I have the bottle next to me in case we talk politics.
Going back to Marvel movies, I guess
let's drag it back to Marvel.
We got to get geek off the bottle.
It seems more and more over time, like with every year that goes by, and the more these movies come out, there's more people saying, "Oh, I'm so sick of these superhero movies. They've completely dominated the industry. When are we going to see something more elevated?" You know what we had before these Marvel movies? We had crap like Barbed Wire and Battlefield Earth. We really want to go back to that.
Yeah, there was really.
Well, I got a news bulletin for him. They also got 3 billboards outside which was brilliant. I mean, it's not 100% my cup of tea, but I defy you to find something that is structured as well as that was.
I think I think it's a case of that's just how nostalgia works. You remember things the way they never actually were.
Yeah.
Because the only time in American mainstream movies when you could maybe make a case that the theaters weren't just full of crap was the 70s, and even that is arguable, but the 70s was the only time when like major Hollywood studios were actually making an effort to make great films, and to put that out there and say we're gonna give, you know, like promising young directors and writers a chance, and we're going to put this out as our A material and say we're going to try to make the greatest films that we can make. And they did that for most of the 70s, and then Jaws and Star Wars came along and they said, no, never mind. And it's been like that ever since.
Blackula Scream was
Blackula Scream is a masterpiece. Shaft Goes to Africa, the underappreciated episode in that series. But yeah, and so 70, part of the 70s, all of the 80s, all of the 90s, pretty much everything up to now, whatever the trend was, it's always been a few bright spots here and there. Every year has great films, but also every year has just a bunch of garbage that gets released and people go to see it and it makes a lot of money, but nobody remembers it after the fact. That's how it's always been.
95% of everything is crap. I mean,
that's how it's always been.
I'll tell you what, though. This morning on CBS Sunday Morning, did anybody catch that?
I didn't see it. No,
I don't watch
never awake on Sunday morning.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what, it's not as good as it used to be, but it does have its moments. And as it comes to that, we all remember I'm Mad as Hell and I'm Not Going to Take It Anymore.
Yeah,
from Network. Yeah,
Network.
It's on Broadway.
I've seen. Yeah, I see.
With Bryan Cranston as
the angry white guy who's yelling about black people.
Howard Beale. Yeah.
Now, the only thing I'll tell you, what I'd love to see is who do they cast as Arthur Jensen, as, you know, the executive who co-opts Beale. Because that casting would have to be really good. Because Ned Beatty took that one and he absolutely ran with it.
Alec Baldwin.
Ooh, would work.
Oh my word! I just remembered something. Okay, the first Men in Black movie. That movie was a huge hit at the time. Some would say it's even kind of overrated, but I remember like part of the buzz was people were suddenly realizing, wait a second, summer movies can be good? Like, it wasn't even that amazing a movie. It was a very good movie, but people were so used to all the crap being dumped into that time of year that it was shocking that, oh my gosh, we could finally go back to the theater in the summer. There's something worth seeing. Let's go.
It's more than
the
just a
problem
place
is
to be
they
cool.
followed it with Men in Black 2, which was
Yeah, I think
I did enjoy Men in Black 2, but I can understand people saying it's like not as good, and they probably just like really just never got back to the height of the first Men in Black movie, because like there's now a fifth one coming out, Men in Black International.
Men in Black
International with like Chris.
True.
Yeah, I feel like that's a lesson that Hollywood has had a chance. It has a chance to learn that lesson every few years, and it never does. And I think we're just lucky that the Marvel movies have been consistently sort of overseen by the same people for most of them. And
it learns it selectively is the problem, and there are some people out there who can't be bothered to learn.
Well, I remember a couple years ago when the first Deadpool movie came out, and it was like a big hit. And I think it was James Gunn who wrote a blog about it. And he said, now just watch, they're going to learn exactly the wrong lesson. You know, they're going to see, oh, look, a raunchy R-rated superhero movie was a big hit. So that, I guess that must be what people want. And they're going to completely miss the fact that it was funny, that it actually had a heart, even though it was really raunchy and self-aware. Like they're going to start churning out these like super ironic, nihilistic R-rated movies that are incredibly violent and pointless and dreary, and they're going to be like, why aren't people going to see it? They like Deadpool, because they're going to completely miss what made Deadpool a good movie.
Hellboy had a really touching romance.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Hellboy didn't need to be rated R. They added a bunch of things to the recent Hellboy just to make it R, with terrible CG to like for the gore effects and the blood effects. They made Hellboy rated R. It could easily be PG-13. It would have been fine. It still had like problems of like rushing to like various different scenes, and like I didn't felt engaged from the first scene of the movie, and not as good as like the first movie. So not the director's not as good as Guillermo del Toro. True, the actor who played Hellboy, who was fine, but it's not as good as Ron Perlman. Yeah. So it's like watch Blood and Iron instead of like the recent Hellboy movie, because most people haven't seen the animated Hellboy movies, and Blood and Iron is actually worth watching. I like Sword of Storm, but I don't think it's as good. But Blood and Iron is actually worth watching, as well as like the other two Hellboy movies.
Yes. Which reminds me, I did finally, I was able to find it. I found Watchmen on Netflix, and I finally went all the way through it. so I don't have to go through it again.
You didn't care for it?
I mean, no,
Zack Snyder's not a good
gag me.
director.
Gag me. I mean, somebody needs to take Zach and just put him in a padded room somewhere, close
him
the
out
door,
back, beat him
and
with a
throw away
hose.
the key.
Yeah.
My mother attempted to watch Watchmen years ago. She had to stop. Like, she had to quit at the scene where the dogs are like eating kids.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't for me.
No.
I liked I'll qualify this and say it's been a long time since I've watched it. So I may watch it with fresh eyes now and not like it as much.
Mhm.
But I remember really liking Watchmen when I saw it in the theater, and when I saw it and then when I saw they released the extended director's cut on DVD, and I did not like that. I thought that the things they added, I thought just completely ruined it. Like it's a case where it's like, okay, you shouldn't have put this stuff back in, because it completely wrecks the movie. The theatrical cut I thought was a lot better, but I think even at the time, what I said about it was I like it because ultimately for me it winds up being greater than the sum of its parts, because there are huge problems that I had with it. And one of the problems I had with it was that it was more gratuitously violent than it needed to be. Like, Watchmen is a violent story. The comic is a very dark, violent story, but it doesn't like revel in it. It doesn't linger over like the gore and the blood.
It's not celebrating it in the way the movie.
Yeah. And in Snyder's Watchmen movie, it's like you get the the reference I always make is like there's like close-ups of compound fractures. Like there's the superheroes, the good guys are like breaking people's arms in half and the bones coming out. It's like, I just don't think we need to see that. I just don't think that serves any
Here's
purpose.
the problem with the problem with Watchmen is Alan Moore, the guy who made the comic.
Yeah.
It was a warning. He was saying, "Hey, we should be glad there aren't real superheroes because they would only let us down."
Alan Moore,
This was his idea. Wait, what?
Alan Moore's an anarchist, I've been told. I mean, like V for Vendetta. It's kind of
Well, my problem with it
what I'm
also.
saying is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your
Finish
point.
the
Finish your
point I was
point.
making. The point was, the comic was, saying if we had real superheroes, it would go like this. But Zack Snyder, I guess he didn't understand. He didn't get that reading of it, and so he played the story completely straight.
Yeah.
My problem with it is that it is, I mean, all of the characters, and I think virtually without exception, are so unremittingly self-involved.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, you would have to be to do that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, tell it to Steve Rogers. Tell it to Thor.
Well, no, we're talking about
even
an
Tony
Alan Moore's
Stark.
deconstruction of superheroes.
Yeah.
Even Tony Stark gets outside of his own ego finally.
But,
For a few minutes.
But if those kind of characters of the Marvel characters, Steve Rogers and Tony Stark, we are elevating them because they're fictional characters, as it were.
Well,
And,
so are the Watchmen.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I do think that was the point. I mean, I like Nick was saying, like, I do think in Moore's original story, like you're supposed to think that Dr. Manhattan is kind of scary. You're supposed to think that the other heroes are that they're not people you should aspire to. Like, the point was, if there were real superheroes, it would change the world in mostly really bad ways.
Yeah,
because they would still be human with human flaws, and they would bring with it all the baggage that we non-superheroes have, and they would just elevate it to a level of glory and violence.
I think this goes back to a point we made in the last Hangout where we talked about, if you're looking at something that's animated, you don't have any expectation of reality.
Right.
Whereas if you're looking at live characters in a live situation, there is a tendency to map an expectation to one degree or another where it simply isn't appropriate.
Yeah, I think you're right. And as far as like the difference between characters like we see in Watchmen and characters like Steve Rogers or Tony Stark, like as I said in my review of Endgame, like the parts that choked me up when I was watching the movie and made me feel like I was going to cry were not the tearjerker parts. They were the heroic parts,
Mhm.
you know, where the good guys were like standing against this apparently insurmountable evil and saying, I'm not going, you know, you're going to have to beat me. I'm not going to give up.
Yeah.
And that really, those were the parts that really moved me. And that's usually what moves me in superhero
Yeah.
movies, you know,
and
yeah, go ahead.
there's that one hero shot in Age of Ultron where they're making the assault in the castle, and you have this one slow-mo of everybody, you know, coming across the screen like that. I mean, that's got to be what you're talking about, and that's what it's the hero shot. It's absolutely the hero shot, and it's great. And that they're conscious enough to do that.
Terrible tactics, though.
Yeah, terrible tactics.
But it's the splash page in the comic book. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're superheroes. It's what we do.
but I think part of what I find so moving about that is the awareness, whether it's conscious in that moment or not, that's a fantasy, that's not what life is really like. Because real life, if there were really superheroes in reality, it would probably be a lot more like Watchmen than like, you know, Captain America and Iron Man. But that's sad. It's that awareness of that space between the fantasy and something more like the reality. But it's also like, but we should want to try and be like Captain America. Like we should look at characters like that and like Superman and say like, you know, okay, but we should aim for that. You know, we can't do that. It's ridiculous. Nobody, or Captain Picard in Star Trek, nobody's ever going to be that good. He's just too perfect. But you should at least aim for it. You know, you could look at it and be inspired by it and say like, but I should try to do the right thing. I should try to make the best decision. I should try to help people and be selfish.
Honestly, in my mind, I've always kind of like, there's always more I should be doing. There's always more I could be doing. There's always more activism I could be doing. There's always more involvement I could be doing. I try to do the best I can. Like, for example, I'm going to like share my screen and remind people. Well, first a plug to like our friend John Brockman's channel, Social Justice Alchemy. he does like streams where he sings and plays video games, but also each Saturday he will stream with not only me, Jonathan Scott, I'm Random Geek, but also our friends Tom McDonald and Little Honor. It's 3 anarchists and anarcho-communists and a cat. And we just rattle on for like an hour or 3 or an hour and a half about like whatever happened that week. Because remember, work week is a fiction. Monday, doubly so. You can get rid of them if you really want to. But now on to the charities, because we live under the system of capitalism, and if you don't have money, like our friends Makaya B, he needs some money to like stay on his feet. Like his Twitter bio, he is surviving because of spites. And, and so he needs like 350 to reach his goal. Our new friend that is like asking for like money, Foxy Jezebel, she lost her job, so she needs about like to reach about like $1,500 to like keep afloat to survive from the system of capitalism. Our friend and comrade Phoenix Rising 87 still needs a lot to get to her goal, $7,000 to like keep her housing situation that she has right now. And our friend and comrade Johanna, please donate money via PayPal to severejoe@gmail.com. And the links are all below in the description. Steve Shives did put the links to the description. Thank you for doing that, Steve. And those are all of my plugs, and I'll stop sharing. But I at least try to do that. And I honestly do actually give a lot of money to like all these people. With the GoFundMe thing, you can see the money that I give, not to purchase anything of that. But,
stop bragging on yourself.
I know.
God, it's disgusting.
Virtue signaling cuck.
But I honestly try to do the best I can. Honestly, just like increasing the debt on my credit cards, just so that like Johanna can like be able to eat and be able to take care of her daughter, because she only gets some amount of money from the government, and we have the cost of living. I think we should like start to think that like cost of living is inhumane, especially for those people who can't afford the cost of living.
Think about that. Like if we call it the cost of living and people can't afford it, maybe we should do something about that. Yeah, and I feel the same way. I feel bad that I can't do more. You know what I mean? Like I feel bad that I can't contribute to all of those that you just said. And you know, to bring it back to superheroes real quick before we sign off, that I think those are also some of my favorite superhero stories, like where you see that they show like not even Superman can save everybody. You know, like he tries to do as much good as he can, and even he can't get to everybody.
I need to rewatch the Superman animated series. That's on Amazon Prime. That I always loved that animated series because it's always those episodes, because like it's not that like Superman is super powerful and can like do anything. You just gotta give him a challenge that will match his powers or be in like a different skill set that he cannot overcome. There are the difficulties he cannot overcome. It's all about good writers. Come on, like you said.
Speaking of Superman, sort of. Has anyone seen trailers for Brightburn?
Yes. Oh, that looks so good.
I have not.
Yes, it looks like it's like they're doing Man of Steel, only he's bad on purpose.
Yeah.
not because the writing is shitty and they don't know how to write a superhero. They're like making him a scary character on purpose. The
aesthetic is great. The aesthetic is great. Brightburn.
Brightburn, and it's directed by James Gunn.
He knows what he's doing. Gun by itself is a recommendation.
So it should be pretty good.
To one more time, just go to a more positive note before we're wrapping up. I was going to say, I don't think Captain America, Steve Rogers, is unrealistic. Uncommon, yeah, maybe, but there are people in the world who are just that nice. And the entire idea is that he didn't get his powers until he had already like struggled like anyone else, and he just didn't change after getting the powers. He continued being good. Yeah. I love that kind of story. That's why I don't think it's that far a cry. Most of the most vicious people, like Donald Trump, they were handed everything they have in life. They were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and so is any wonder they turned out the way they did.
Maybe that's what makes Cap such a great character. It makes and such a moving character in many ways is because he's just, when you get down to the heart of it, he's just a decent guy. Like he's just a decent, just a normal, decent guy who just tries to help people and do the right thing and not hold anything against anybody that he doesn't, for unless he has a good reason. And, you're right. He's not impossible.
He's so scrawny. I still say he's scrawny.
There's one step beyond that though. This is a point that you hear in a lot of commercials and such like, but it's the truth. There are people out there who run toward the danger.
Yeah,
and he is absolutely. I mean, he's out in front of that pack.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those are real people.
Power doesn't always corrupt. That's the great thing about Spider-Man is that most of his villains are like sad old men who the moment they were given some scrap of power, their first instinct was to use it irresponsibly. And he easily could have turned into just one of those other guys, but not everybody's like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, and Spidey particularly, like he had his moment where he started to do that and then he learned his lesson in a really terrible way,
Yeah, so. Exactly. He got hell, he got it rubbed in his nose about it.
Yeah.
And that really caused a massive change of heart.
Yeah. Yep. All right. We're going to wrap this up. Thanks everybody for watching. As I say at the end of every month when we do this, if this is something that I just do for my Patreon patrons as a little bit of a thank you for the support. If you like what I do on YouTube and this looks like fun to you.
We didn't fill up either. I mean, it's like
that's true. We had some room this month.
And like we had like old returns of like James and Doug.
Yeah, James hadn't been here for a while.
Robert was in here, but he did not talk. I saw his poodle on the camera, but he didn't talk. So we didn't hear the incredible voice of Robert. We should have let Robert talk about whatever he wants to talk about in the next one of these. Robert, please speak up. We love your voice. And,
absolutely. Yes. So patreon.com/Steve Shives if you think I'm worth giving money to, like all the people in this room are doing for some reason, which I very much appreciate. I thank everybody
for me to be here. That's why I did it.
Because
Steve, we're in our rooms.
Good point. So thanks everybody. Thanks to all of you for being here with me. Thanks for all of you for watching, and we'll see you again to do this next month. Bye everybody.